Hi. So we've got the first one. First question is this is a weighted average capital question. So you've got 2 points to this. First, you need basic weighted average cost of capital is what you're saying is what the weighted average cost of capital is. The logic is a business raises a bunch of cash using either debt or equity. And as they use debt or equity, it's just a combined amount. So when they invest in a project or something like that, they just take it from a pool of funds. So there's just a bunch of funds sitting around at a company, and therefore that's why they've got different costs. Some of that money came from debt, some of it came from equity, and because you're not worrying about it when you're pulling out the cost of your funds, you're not worrying about it when you're pulling out the financing from your company. You therefore just need to work out what the different costs are generally to get a view of how much it's costing you to borrow this money in the first place on an average. You've got this much equity, this much debt. It costs you this much to raise your equity, say 15%, and it costs you 10% to raise debt. So say you've got 50% equity, 50% debt. You just times the 15% by 50%, 7.5, 10% by half, and that's 12.5% then. Okay, that's the logic you're using here. So you've got to work out first your cost of equity, then your cost of debt. And the key thing here is when they give you've got to remember when you get your cost of debt, the cost of debt always needs to be worked out after tax, because debt interest payments are tax deductible. Okay, so let's work on this question. So open Excel. So we'll call this question 1. Okay, so you've been given the following information. So all this stuff is to be used to work out how much equity there is in the business. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that yet. The company beta is 1.1. Current yield of government bonds is 1.5. Okay, so let's work out the cost of equity. So the cost of equity we're going to work out using CAPM, and CAPM is equal to the risk-free rate plus beta times by the return of the market minus the risk-free rate, and that's your cost of equity. Okay. Okay, so your cost of equity, the company's beta is 1.1, so let's work this out. So we'll just put 1.1 in there because that's the beta. I'll move it down here. So we've got the beta. We've got RF, which is 1.5. And we've got RM, which is 6. So cost of equity using CAPM is that plus that times by that minus that, yeah? So 6.45 is our cost of equity. Cost of debt is irredeemable shares. So that's easy. If it's irredeemable, you just do the percentage times by the value of the shares, the value of the loan stock. So as it's 4, so cost of debt is just simply literally 4, it's going to be 4 divided by market value of debt, which is 3%. Tell you what, let's just times that by 100 rather than do that, because then it'll be easier. Just make it a number. Okay, so that's your cost of debt, but you need to remember you have to do your after-tax cost of debt, because that is the return that the investor gets. You need to work out what the company's actually paying for it, and because tax is because interest is tax deductible, you take that 1 minus the tax rate, which was 20%. So your cost of debt is actually 2.94. Okay, so now we know the costs, we've got to work out the weightings. So we need to weight these by how much equity. So if it was 50% equity, we would do that. And then we would do that for the 50% debt. And then just add them together, and that would be our WACC. That would be our weighted average cost of capital, but it's not. We can't do that. So now we'll just write down our cost of debt is equal to that. And our cost of equity is equal to that. Okay. So we have got 20 million shares. So here we've got 20 million shares. Yeah. 20 million shares at a market price of £2.30. So market value of equity is 20 million, yeah, times by 2.3. Okay, so that's your total value of equity. But then we're going to add in retained earnings, because that is also equity. And I believe you have to add in retained earnings into the actual. You should earn in retained earnings. Okay. So they don't want you to put retained earnings in. So don't ignore that. So don't put retained earnings in. I just wanted to make sure. Don't put retained earnings. Some people do, some people don't. In your case, your lecturer doesn't want you to, which I understand. That's fine. And the loan stock has a market value of, and also I guess if you wouldn't include it, if you're including the market value, because that would already be factored into the price, the share price would factor in those retained earnings. So you'd be counting them twice. So ignore that. So now what you do with your market value of debt, MV of debt, you would just do, because your market value is 109, it was 109, but usually it's valued at 100, so it's actually 9% higher. So you just take the 109, divide it by the 100, and times it by 18 million. Okay, so that is your market value of debt. And then your total capital is the sum of that, yeah? So your weightings then are just that divided by that, yeah? And then that divided by that. Okay, so 30% and 70%. Okay, then what you do, so equity is much higher than debt, so you would take that, times that by 70%, and take that and times it by 30%, and then you just add them up, those two, and that's your weighted average cost of capital. Okay. Weighted average cost of capital is 5.4. Okay. That's literally it. It's just looking at the different levels, because what they're saying there is your pool of funds, the amount that you have, the pool of funds, 70% of it that you are using to invest in whatever projects is formed of equity, 30% of it is formed of debt. So you're funding your assets 70% through equity, 30% through debt. Your equity costs 6.45%, and your debt costs 3.67%. Okay, and that was A. And then you weight them by how much they make of the total. Okay. All right. Okay, so Savane PLC will pay a dividend of 25p per share this year and expect their dividends to grow at 3% for the foreseeable future. Okay, calculate the cost of equity. So the cost of equity here, you'll see this is the model you have to use. This one here. So you've got D0, because D0 is 25p. You've got P0 because that's 2.1, 2.3. Okay. So what you do, so in this case, I'll put D0 is 25p. P0, yeah, is 230 because your share price is here, and your growth in dividends is 3%. Okay, so what you do is you do equals 25 times it by 1.03 because that's 3%. Yeah. Open close brackets. Divide it by 230 and then plus 0.03 because that's your growth. Yeah. Plus 0.03. Okay. And then your cost of equity is 14.2%. Quite wildly different from the other one. Yeah. That's 14.2%. Okay. All right, so that's that one done. That's question 1 done. So question 2. Okay, so this question's about simply like what you have to just know your project terminology. So here it's saying project E, A, and E are mutually exclusive. Each project can only be undertaken once and is divisible. So what that means is you can't do more. They're mutually exclusive, but they're divisible. So it means that you can do multiple, you can cut them in half and stuff like that. So basically the key thing here is all you do, it's simple because they've given you the present value of cash flows. So all you have to do is this. Well, it's not going to let me do it. I'm going to have to type it out. 15, 25, 10, 30, 20, 31.9, 46.86, 64.42, 22.82, 54.24. Okay, so you want to work out your profitability index. Yeah. and your profitability index is equal your PV of future cash flows, which they've given you, divided by initial investment, and you just choose the one with the highest. So you just do this. So you can see there, and okay, you can see there the answers are exactly the same. So 15, 1.87, 6.44, 0.76, 2.71, yeah? So what you will then want to do is you have to choose the one that's got the highest. You just choose it in ranks, yeah? So you rank it like this: 1, and that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, and that's 5. So